everybody who is participating to join us. Let's get underway. Welcome to this conversation. My name is Wade Crowfoot, and I lead our California Natural Resources Agency. And we're really excited to be in dialogue here today on a really exciting and critically important priority. Of course, ancestral land return to California Native American tribes and supporting tribal leadership to care for our environment. We've got an amazing set of speakers, and it should be a great conversation today. I want to share with you a little bit about these conversations if you haven't been part of them. We call this the Secretary Speaker Series, and this is really an opportunity to lift up leaders doing interesting work across California, big thinkers outside of government, as well as key priorities like those that we're talking about today. I want to first of all wish everybody a happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We're really proud at the Natural Resources Agency that we lift up our diversity and cultural heritage across the 25,000 women and men that work at our agency. And this month, we are celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage. So you'll see on the screen a calendar with a bunch of different events. Some are in person, some are virtual, including our next Secretary Speakers series that's taking place in just a few weeks. So if I could, I'll ask my colleague Geeta Chandra, who we have to thank for organizing these discussions, just to put a link to these events in the chat. So big thanks there. A little bit more about these discussions. So we work to make these as interactive as possible. We're joined by well over 200 people here today. And so there's a couple ways that we do this. One is we provide information throughout the conversation on the chat function. So if you can open the chat function, Geeta is going to provide hyperlinks to information on our speakers and their institutional affiliations, but then also information on topics that come up. There'll be a copy of that chat that's provided on our website in the coming days. Sometimes people ask for that because there's informational links that they want to follow up on. There's also a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So at any point during our discussion, you can raise questions or share observations. And we, the panelists within the discussion, will see that. And when we move into the group discussion part of our dialogue, I'll work to bring those questions into the discussion. We are recording this dialogue, so it will be available tomorrow at resources.ca.gov. So again, both the video recording and then the recording of the information on our chat. So once again, huge thanks for joining us. And I want to jump into the conversation here. We have a remarkable set of leaders here today. We have 3 tribal leaders who are driving important projects within their own tribes on ancestral land return. And we have our key leader in state government who has driven this program forward. And that's who I want to introduce first. So it's my pleasure and honor to bring onto the screen here my friend and colleague, Geneva E.B. Thompson. Geneva, welcome to the screen. We saw each other in person yesterday. I think I'm in Southern California today. You're across Sacramento, but so glad to be with you. Some may know that Geneva serves as the first ever Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs at the Natural Resources Agency. And so much that we'll talk about here today has been spearheaded by Geneva and her remarkable team. So first of all, welcome, Geneva. How are you feeling?
Feeling great. It's been a great couple of weeks just announcing ancestral land return and funding to support tribes and all of their exciting and amazing work that they're doing within their communities. I'm actually joining everyone from the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers annual conference. And so it's just great to be able to connect to tribal leaders in person and also here online with you all.
Oh, yeah. So you're outside of Sacramento as well.
I am about 2 hours north.
Okay. Well, listen, there's a lot of folks probably from tribal governments or communities here being part of this conversation. There's others that may be liaisons to tribal governments that work in this area. But one of the things I love about these discussions is they also bring people into these conversations that really don't know much about the topic. So I want to spend a little time sort of setting some context for our discussion here today. So I'll do that, and then I'll turn it over to you, Geneva, to fill in. You know, the way I talk about our work on tribal partnerships is it's a journey. And that journey started in Governor Newsom's administration in the first few months of his term, when he invited tribal leaders from throughout California to Sacramento. And at the site of the future Native American Heritage Center in West Sacramento, he issued a formal apology on behalf of California to Native American tribes. And this is something actually that hadn't been done by other governors. And it recognized a history of disconnection, discrimination, and violence against California tribes. He read from the inaugural address of California's first governor that quite literally put a financial bounty on killing Native women and children. And he talked about this as genocide, as the founding of being part of the founding of California. And that's, I think, an important place that we start because it's an acknowledgement of the history that we're working to change. And as we've talked about, Geneva, the governor, tribal leaders thought that was powerful, but if that's all that happened, it obviously was nothing close to enough. So our focus has been, how do we build a different future? How do we acknowledge this, recognize we represent institutions that have perpetuated this, but then work to build a better future with California tribes. And so, you know, a next step in the journey was creating the position that you now fill, and that others across state agencies, folks that can actually drive this agenda forward. So let me ask you to talk about sort of how would you categorize the work that we're doing at the Natural Resources Agency and across government. Let me first of all say that, you know, maybe even before that, you know, a key partner in all of this work with the governor is the Tribal Affairs Secretary for the governor, and that's Christina Snyder-Ashtari. And Christina not only was critical to that formal apology, but then also on everything that we're doing, including a Truth and Healing Council. So for those that are coming to this for the first time and maybe not of tribal background, how do you describe the work that the state government's doing?
Yeah. So thank you for discussing the governor's apology to California Native American tribes. I think that was a critical policy moment for the state of California in acknowledging the historical wrongs, but also laid out a path for how do we move forward in that spirit of truth and healing. And so the Truth and Healing Council, the secretary that you just mentioned, is one step in that. And the governor's office going across the state of California, meeting with tribal leaders, talking with Native communities about their histories, their oral histories, the written histories, the documents that really informed and perpetuated those harms against tribes. It's part of that bigger kind of listening sessions and community engagement that's being led in the governor's office. The key component of the Truth and Healing Council is also to identify steps forward to address particular harms that tribes have been facing and are still feeling the ramifications of here today. And so in that truth and healing work, and in the idea of moving forward and addressing those historical wrongs, here at the California Natural Resources Agency, we're really rolling up our sleeves to get to work on those concrete actions that are going to address the historical wrongs and the harms that Native communities are facing today. And so the particular historical wrong that we've been looking at as it relates to our ancestral land return policy is the forced removal of Native communities, of tribal governments from their ancestral lands. And how do we acknowledge that history and then support and partner with tribes in their ancestral land return priorities. We're so excited to be able to partner with the 27 departments, conservancies, and commissions underneath the agency umbrella, as well as in consultation and in collaboration with California Native American tribes, thinking about how do we shift how the state does business, how the state works in partnership with tribes around increasing tribal access and co-management to ancestral lands, to natural resources, and then really identifying opportunities for increasing ancestral land return. One illustrative example of this work is informed by the over 75 different tribal consultations and meetings we had in the development of the Pathways to 30 by 30 initiative. In the Pathways to 30 by 30 initiative, the goal is to conserve 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by 2030. And a core commitment in that initiative is to partner with tribes in that work. And that was really informed by tribal leaders and the consultations that we had to really kind of frame up like tribal partnerships is necessary for this goal and in the conservation of our lands. And then the next step in that is in the formation of the brand new Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program. We were appropriated $100 million to support tribally led nature-based solutions projects, with the main focus being that ancestral land return to support the 30 by 30 initiative. And so it's just very exciting. We got to partner so closely with all of our grant applicants. We have a grant team here at agency that provided technical assistance, open office hours every Friday. Like, it was just a great community around this grant program, and we're so honored to be able to make those awards just last April, and awarding over $100 million. We did $107.7 million worth of awards to support 34 projects and supporting nearly 39,000 acres of ancestral lands to be returned to tribes. And so it was incredible. A busy April, very exciting. But that's just a little taste of the work that we're trying to do here at the agency.
Yeah, and in a moment we'll hear from the tribal leaders that are driving 3 of those 34 projects. And before that, I'm hoping that you'll be able to show a map and give everybody a sense of the sort of the type of projects and where these are. But so just to back up though a little bit to make sure the dots are connected, our agency has responsibility for helping steward the land that we know as California. We've disconnected ourselves from tribal experiences, tribal leadership, tribal wisdom over time. And so this movement is really, maintaining our mission, but doing so in terms of supporting tribal leadership, building these tribal partnerships, right? One thing I talk about is this is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, because our tribal communities have been caring for our lands and waters for thousands of years, right? And what's remarkable is a lot of that sort of traditional ecological knowledge and wisdom that we've disconnected ourselves from. We're now working very urgently to put back in practice. Prescribed fire, for example, cultural fire, our tribal communities that burn the land at low levels in a controlled way to reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire. That was prohibited for over a century. Tribal members got arrested for that practice, and now come full circle, and we desperately and urgently need that that sharing of tribal wisdom where appropriate.
And,
so
I think the policies of like increasing tribal access, co-management, and land return really is to get to that heart of that, right? Where tribal leaders, cultural practitioners, native people have been stewarding these lands and waters since time immemorial, and that stewardship has really informed deep place-based knowledges, and that expertise is just so critical for the health and well-being of our lands and resources. And so ancestral land return is just an exciting opportunity to ensure that knowledge base and those experts are the stewards of that land moving forward. And really, to your point, Secretary, where that's going to just help all of California be healthier and stronger and more resilient in a changing climate.
That's incredible. And I'll just mention that you talked, and you're going to talk in a moment about this $107 million focus on ancestral land return, supporting tribal projects. And this is actually the second source of funding that's actually directed and transferred to tribes to do important work. This Wildfire Resilience Fund, I think, boy, was it last year or the year before, identified $20 million to transfer to tribes, which was very much thanks to the tribal leadership making the case to Senator McGuire and others to champion this effort. So getting funds into the hands of tribes to do the work that they so effectively do, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So appreciate the tribal leaders that advocated for those cultural fire funds, and then CAL FIRE for establishing this new grant program. And I think the exciting piece there is like we're really seeing grant programs that are tailor made for tribes and tribal priorities, ensuring that those resources and the support through our grant programs are available to tribes to have those financial resources available to advance this important work. So 20 million for coastal fire, forestry resiliency from CAL FIRE. We also had the California Conservation Corps establish their tribal youth nature-based conservation corps program and supporting tribes in establishing tribal youth conservation corps programs. So young people can have those hands-on experiences in these nature-based solutions type work and have meaningful jobs doing what they love, caring for their ancestral lands. And so many different examples across our departments of how funding can be made available to support tribes and their nature-based solutions priorities. And I don't know, Secretary, if we should pull up the map for the.
Yeah, let's pull up the map and maybe turn up your volume a little bit, Gita. We just want to make sure that everybody can hear you, Gita, to Geneva. So yes, let's look at this map. There have been instances of tribal ancestral land return, in recent years. Fish and Wildlife has done an ancestral land return. Our state lands commission, but this is easily the most in terms of what's been enabled by state funding. So how should we look at this map?
Yeah, so this map is showing all the tribes that have received awards from the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program. And as you can see, we've color-coded it based off tribe and location here in the state. And we were so excited to see the wide geographic diversity of the tribes represented in this grant program. And one that I would love to highlight, because we just celebrated the ribbon cutting ceremony, actually, was the Hoopa Valley tribe was one of our early awardees and just acquired over 10,000 acres of ancestral lands next to the Hoopa Valley Tribal Reservation in Northern California. And we had an exciting moment in celebrating that ribbon cutting just last week and seeing those lands returned. And very much looking forward to partnering with all of the tribes that are listed here on the screen as they go through their property acquisition processes and celebrating when everything closes and moves forward.
Wow. I'll say each of those stars represents a project that has been designed and built and driven by tribal leaders. I think it's really important to note these aren't state projects. These are projects that tribes are doing, and this funding is simply supporting their leadership, and it's awesome. We've spent some time talking about just the diversity of projects. So huge thanks for that. And I know Gita may have already put in a link to this map where people can find it online with a little bit more explanation on the projects. So let's talk to our tribal leaders that are driving these projects. And I'm first really excited to introduce Kevin Osuna, who serves as chair of the Ipai Nation of Santa Isabel. And so Chair Osuna, thank you for joining. Want to bring you up on screen. Wonderful to see you. And if you can just introduce yourself, and for those, we're now joined by 388 people, believe it or not, many which probably aren't familiar with your tribe and the work that you do. So if you could just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your tribal nation, and then share about this project that you've developed.
Elquanan, Equanan, Tecamac, Inia Shamuth, Amu, Awu, Hello, my name's Kevin Osuna. I'm the chairman of the Ipai Nation of San Isabel. We're located in the Northeast County, San Diego County. We have we had 15,500 acres, but now we have, with this grant, 16,600 acres. And when I first started about this grant, in all honesty, it was a little off-putting, Ancestral land back. I got into it to the early webinars with Geneva and the CNRA, and they were like, well, yeah, get the land back, but you got to put it in conservancy and you have to do public access too. But once we got into more and looking into it, and we understood what it was about, the 30 by 30 initiative, it's very important for tribes to conserve and protect and reduce our carbon footprint. So there was pieces started to come together, started to work together. One of our local realtors approached us from another property we purchased, small little 2 acres, and she showed us this land that was available, and it was 1,100 acres of this beautiful little piece of land on the back north side of our reservation. And first hearing about it, we thought there was no way. It was $9 million. We're a non-gaming tribe. We don't have huge revenues here, and it was just a dream and a wish for it to possibly happen, And then me and our councilman Bruce got together and we're like, well, there's this grant, the nature-based solution, ancestral land back. Let's try for that. As soon as we started putting those pieces together, our team got together and hit the ground running. We started putting it together, filling out the grant application, went for the shovel ready. We weren't quite ready for that, got moved over to the second phase. We made it work. Big shout out to Geneva and Jordan. Some of the other team, I'm forgetting your names, but they assisted us. I'm sure we bugged them with tons of questions, but it was a huge opportunity. And to say we're excited would be an understatement. This is huge for our tribe, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Chairman, thanks so much for that. Can you talk a little bit more about, why, maybe it's obvious, but possibly not to everybody. Why is the land so important to the tribe? Why is actually, having the ownership, the stewardship of the land so important?
One of the main things would be our spiritual connected. We're one and one with the land, We never thought of the land belonging to us. We actually belong to our land, and it goes back to one of our words for our people, for our Ipa here. It's Mot. And Mot stands for our body, but it also stands for the earth that we walk on. So that in our creation story, our creator created us from the land, the very land we walk on. So that connection right there, just deep, it goes deep, and the land is the foundation of our culture, our traditions, our way of life. Everything comes from the land that keeps us alive. It provides every single thing we need to thrive and propagate.
That's incredible. So then what does it look like from here? You've got identified as getting the funding that's going to be important. What's the next step?
The next step is finalizing, actually getting the funds, figuring out that little bit of legwork, and then the implementation of our plan for the land. We're gonna do the public access, so we're gonna have some primitive campsites there. We're gonna do a cultural resource center on the land. There's a couple infrastructures on the land that's gonna allow us to do it. So we have attempted to do a museum in the past, but we didn't have the infrastructure for it. And this is going to be the perfect opportunity to do our cultural ecological center, educate our people, educate non-tribal people, and just create a future and opportunity for our people.
Oh, that's incredible. So maybe last question is how'd you share the news with your tribal council? Because it sounded like initially you were a little skeptical about, can this come together? Is the state actually capable of getting this done? And then what was it like to actually get the call?
It was pure elation. It was just everybody was super excited, especially our team right here with our departments came together. Joe Weir, our EPA director, our grants writer, Nicole and Daria, our director of operations, Bobby Sue, and a few other key components to that, and it was just we got it late in the evening. Bobby Sue was checking her emails because I don't check mine in the evening, but I should. But she just was excited too, and it was very emotional for us to hear this. For the land to come back, it's huge. It's the main goal of, I'm sure, of all tribes. The land is super important to us. We are pushed off in a bad way, and to get it back, that's a step towards healing these wounds.
Mm. That's so powerful. And I would just, echo, that's how we see this as a step forward. We're proud of this progress, but recognize there's a lot more work ahead. And Geneva's talked about this funding as a down payment ultimately to, broader ancestral land return with multiple benefits that we need to help, support. So just big thanks, Chairman, for your leadership, for the whole team being able to accomplish. I think we're all really excited ultimately to come down and visit your land and all that
Yeah.
you're going to be able to do on it.
Absolutely.
Great. We're going to bring you back in the conversation, the group conversation, a little bit, but let me just next introduce Tara Fauch-Moore, who is Council Secretary, the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation, and serves as the Director of Landscape Stewardship in an affiliated entity called the American Indian Council of Mariposa County. So Tara, it's great to have you on here. Huge thanks for your collective leadership. Interested in just you sharing more about the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation, your history, and then what brought you to the project, and a little bit more on the project.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the invitation to speak today. We're so excited in all ways. I am the Kenanone Gente, Tara Fauch-Moore, Machixisahuyako. I'm the tribal secretary, as you mentioned, of our tribe, the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation. We are an unrecognized tribe, so we actually are forced to do business through a nonprofit, which is the American Indian Council of Mariposa County. And so we don't think of those as separate entities. It's really all one and the same. And we are indigenous to Yosemite National Park. We're one of 7 tribes that are affiliated with Yosemite. And then we also, historically, ancestrally, we would range and migrate up and down the western slope of the Sierras. So our homelands do include, Mariposa County in that area as well. And so, yeah, this opportunity, I was watching it from the beginning, and I also participated in a lot of those workshops and, getting the grant guidelines put together and hounding Jordan at the office hours, because this is just such a unique opportunity for us as a non-recognized tribe. We don't have any land. We were really detrimentally affected by, of course, the gold rush, of course, the Mariposa Indian Wars, but also the conservation movement. Yosemite is our home. The national forests are our homes. And through the conservation era, we were displaced from those places. And even though we, have maintained relationships with those government entities, and even though we continue to interact with our homelands, it's contentious depending on who the leadership is in those agencies at the time. And so to be able to acquire land that is essentially in Yosemite National Park, it's sandwiched in between Yosemite National Park and the Sierra National Forest, 900 acres on Hennis Ridge. It was something that we didn't originally think was possible. And, we worked closely with the current owners, Pacific Forest Trust. They were really eager to see this land go back into tribal hands. But at first, when we were first approached with this project, we said, I'm sorry, we'd love to, but we can't. And then, there were several tribal members who kind of were like, wait, we can't pass this up. We talked to some of our neighboring tribes, and this grant opportunity kind of started to grow. And we were like, we have to at least try. And so, yeah, we're just elated. It's, again, it's, we're kind of reeling, this wasn't something that 5 years ago we would have thought was even possible. And so it really means a lot for all of us.
Yeah. And so it's kind of hard to get my head around in terms of, you maintaining tribal cohesion without any land. So looking forward, I mean, what do you want to how will the land be helpful, and what's your collective vision for the land and how it impacts the tribe?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that just goes to speak to, the strength of our community, that we've been seeking federal recognition for the past 40 years. And it's really, was the foresight of our elders who created our nonprofit back in the 80s. We are fortunate that our land, is relatively intact. We're rural, and so it hasn't been heavily developed like some other areas of California. But we are getting to that point where we're being priced out of our homelands, and we need to kind of have a centralized place where people can go, and we don't have to ask everything. As I mentioned, we have a close relationship with the National Park Service, and we have a relationship with the U.S. Forest Service, and we can interact with those lands, but we have to ask. And so having this place where we can go and interact with our homelands, develop, our own stewardship capacities. I think that, one of the biggest things for us is that, on the side, we're doing all this work to kind of restore our roles as the first stewards, and to heal that relationship between the people and the landscape. And, by healing the land, you're healing your community, and that just reinforces that community strength. And so to have a piece of land that is exclusively, I don't want to say exclusively ours, because, we recognize that there are our neighboring tribes that also feel really connected to this space. So we'll be working closely with them to, engage them as well. But just to have a place that we can call ours is something that, everybody's just so elated.
Beyond exciting. Beyond exciting. I just say parenthetically, I'm so glad you brought up that, some of the damage done by the modern conservation movement and disconnecting people, and particularly tribal people, from land. We're on a journey led by our state parks and its director, Armando Quintero, to really address that within our state parks. We have 280 across the state. And, Armando and team from state parks are really developing these co-management agreements so that, tribal members don't need permission to, gather important, cultural plants. They don't need permission to perform ceremony. In many cases, they don't need to pay to access their original homeland. So that movement is really going on. But I so appreciate what you're sharing about. Yes, and it's still critically important for tribes to have land that you don't need to ask permission on, or you don't need to set an agreement with a state or federal entity. So I'm so excited for you and for the tribe, and huge kudos to your collective leadership. What's next? How do you make this a reality?
Well, what's really beautiful about this particular funding is that it doesn't just fund acquisition. It also, at least in our case, funds planning. So it'll help with the development of a forest management plan and cultural assessments. It includes some support for our ongoing workforce development. And so we are in the process of building out our stewardship programming, which includes, pollinator habitat restoration and cultural burning and fuels management. And so there will be some training opportunities through this grant to forward that work out on that land. And so it really is it's just a catalyst that's just, I feel like it's going to slingshot this. We have this ball that we've, been carefully developing over the past, couple of years. And this is just going to slingshot us into just being successful in our stewardship goals and really becoming leaders in our region.
That's incredible.
In management.
That is amazing. So I want to bring you into the group conversation in just a little bit, but we have one more tribal leader to connect with and to talk to, and that is Hilo Ramirez. Hilo serves as the tribal treasurer of the Machupta Indian tribe, and Hilo, really excited to have you join. I learned a little bit more about your project, this week actually, and super exciting. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your tribe, where you're at, what you're doing, and what you're getting, what this project is.
Yeah. Hetanayam, Nikiyam sa hilo Niki Ma'a Machupta Madu Ma'a Eskinam Di Sewi, Ukum Utakim Sewi, Ukum Sewatim, Woltim Yamsa Sacramento River. Howdy, y'all. My name's Hilo. My people are the Machupta Madu, and the Machupta are the original people of the Big Chico Creek and Butte Creek watershed, as well as the Sacramento River, which runs through what is now Butte and Glenn County. A little bit about myself. I got some education in biology and other things, and I decided to use that to better my people and bring it back to my community. So for the Machupta tribe, a little bit about our history is that we were terminated in the 1960s, wrongfully terminated. And our reservation, about half of it was given to California State University, Chico, by the federal government, and the other half was given to the city of Chico. We sued the government, the federal government, in the 80s with a coalition of tribes, Sugar Bowl Rancheria versus United States. We got our federal recognition back. However, we had to sign a stipulated judgment that we would not seek our original reservation, which had already been turned into dormitories for Chico State, the baseball stadium, soccer fields, et cetera. And we didn't have a land base until 2018. We were in a lawsuit with Butte County, who sued us and tried to state that we weren't a tribe, even though we had already gotten our federal recognition re-recognized. Big shout out to Geneva. I was at a lot of events last couple years, and every single tribal event that I was at, I saw Geneva there, and she gave the same presentation on this tribal nature-based solutions program and made sure that everyone's questions were answered and we were able to give further clarification. Another shout out to Elaine and Jordan, who were answering 1,000 questions for me throughout the process. It was really refreshing to be able to ask questions about the grant and grant guidelines, especially when it seemed like some of the grant guidelines were copy and pasted from other grants, and the language was intended to fit county governments, not tribal governments, and being able to work through that and ensure that the tribe's needs were met and that things were able to work out. So a little bit about the tribe story with our nature-based solutions grant submission is we have purchased close to 1,000 acres and 2 river miles of land on Big Chico Creek that is spawning habitat. Within Machupta territory is the largest spring run Chinook salmon run, the Butte Creek salmon run, and Big Chico Creek is not the largest. However, it still does have a spring and fall salmon run. However, there is an in-stream barrier caused by some concrete infrastructure that was created in the 1940s that was served as a flume and then also as a defunct salmon ladder. And in low water years, Department of Fish and Game, now Fish and Wildlife, determined in 2006 that salmon aren't able to get past that in-stream barrier in low water years. So that's essentially been every year for the last 20 years. And with our partners, the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, which is the Chico State Nature Reserve, California Trout, California State Parks, who we do a lot of work on the lower Big Chico Creek watershed and on the Sacramento River near its confluence, we were able to identify this grant and then work through casual conversations of, well, the Machupta Tribe's reservation is out in the middle of nowhere. There aren't willing land sellers adjacent to the Machupta Tribe's reservation, and the Machupta Tribe's reservation doesn't have salmon, it doesn't have trout, it doesn't have oaks, it doesn't have those culturally important plants like California Bay Laurel, sedge, etc., that we would need to do our TEK. And through casual conversations, we were able to talk with the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, who mentioned that just a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, they were trying to buy land adjacent to their property in the upper watershed, and that has critical salmon spawning habitat, but they were unsuccessful in their grant application, and they were willing to work with us to reach out to those landowners to see if they're still willing to sell, but instead of selling it to the Chico State Nature Reserve, they would sell to the tribe. And they were very ecstatic. They were glad about it. They had heard about our partnership with the BSER last few years of land transfer on Butte Creek, as well as grants that we have collaborated on wildfire resiliency, prescribed fire, cultural fire, fuels reduction work to prevent another campfire in our area. So by working with our partners and having those connections already established, by having reached out and worked with those nonprofits, those governmental agencies the last 10 or so years, we were able to pull together a grant application last minute and submit something that was at least on paper fulfill the requirements, so that we were able to further develop it during step 2, step 3, etc.
That's amazing. And I think Hilo, the point, sort of the story you tell helps us realize that, these are efforts decades in the making. And each project, each tribe's story and effort around ancestral land return is so different. And it's incredible to see. And, not a lot of people may know how beautiful these canyons, that are your ancestral homelands are, but some of Geneva's colleagues shared photos yesterday, and it's just beautiful, beautiful country, and it's an incredible, incredible river. So, what's it look like? And fast forward, if all this gets implemented, what is the tribe doing in 5, 10, 15 years on the property and with the river?
Yeah, so so a lot of this is informed by the campfire that happened recently. So the campfire is the deadliest fire in California state history. About 100 people died. The entire town of Paradise was leveled, and that happened in our ancestral territory. And the fire footprint also includes our reservation land. So the campfire actually burned through our reservation. And the location of the land to be purchased is between the towns of Cohasset and Forest Ranch and Chico. Forest Ranch is about a mile to the east. Cohasset is about 2 miles to the east, and Chico is about 10 miles to the south. The canyon itself serves as a chimney, a funnel, where wildfire can move very fast, either down canyon or up canyon, depending on the diurnal winds and etc. So our immediate thought process is, one, work with our current partners, California Trout, Big Creek Ecological Reserve, etc., to do salmon restoration projects. The current project we're working with them in Iron Canyon in the city of Chico is going to open up that creek so salmon can get there, depending on whether it's a high or low water year. This land that we're purchasing is protecting the spawning habitat that they need to get to spawn. But there's always more work that can be done. Through 150 years of cattle ranching, there's been human modifications to the stream banks and such, to where the floodplains and streams have been modified. There's always work to be done with that to help the salmon. But most importantly, there's fuels reduction work to be done. We want to do fuels reduction work, 150 years of fire suppression. We need to remove some of those conifers that aren't supposed to be there. We need to propagate some oaks to replace those conifers that are encroaching on what was used to be oak woodland, but due to fire suppression, they've been able to grow taller than the oaks, and then they shade out the oaks, and then the oaks die. So fuels reduction work, we're going to work with our partners to do that, do workforce development, make sure that the ecosystem is healthy, but also our human communities, both our tribal communities, but also our newfound neighbors, the towns of Cohasset, Forest Ranch, City of Chico, are also protected.
That's incredible. So multi-beneficial in nature.
Yes.
Well, listen, let's bring everybody back into group conversation. We have some questions to start off our group conversation. And I want to pose the first one to Geneva and then invite others to join in. So some questions, Geneva, about, I think it was Kevin that mentioned, some of the criteria for this program, including conservation and public access. So Geneva, you've educated me so much on tribal sovereignty and really, supporting tribal leadership. At the same time, these are funding within our agency, so you have to achieve certain environmental outcomes. Can you talk about, how the team applied criteria and then what that means for these awards, and then open to the tribal leaders sharing their own perspective?
Yes, of course. So you're correct, Secretary. We in this grant program definitely want to honor and prioritize tribal sovereignty and tribal ownership and stewardship of these lands returned, while also meeting not only tribal priorities in the conservation and protection of these sacred and important places, but also kind of the broader state environmental goals as well. And so when working through this grant program, and especially thinking through the Pathways to 30 by 30 initiative and the Natural Working Lands Climate Smart strategy, really trying to shape the grant guidelines to achieve those goals. And so this grant program, and why I'm really excited about this grant program, is because we have the flexibility to work closely with tribal leaders in shaping those terms and in shaping the grant agreements. And so we can respect and honor tribal sovereignty and the priorities the tribes have for these particular parcels, but also work closely with the land and those environmental goals. And so it's not a one size fits all, this is the mandatory requirements, but it's more of how do we develop the agreements and management of these lands to achieve both priorities. And so looking forward
That's really
to
helpful.
working with all the leaders that are here on this call and then those who are listening in and having those conversations, because we really do want to tailor it to advance the tribal priorities.
Well, and I'll bet that there's a lot of folks on the call that might work for state or federal government. And so maybe the leaders on the Zoom here, if you can share, Treasurer Ramirez, Hilo, you had shared, for example, that, the initial templated grant, agreement really wasn't built for tribes, more for county governments. But also, Chairman, Council Secretary Tara, Kevin, what advice would you have to state or federal governments that are building these types of programs? What do we need to be thinking about in terms of making them functional and workable for tribes?
Well, I'll just say that is, I think, an ongoing challenge is, oftentimes in some of these tribal grant programs, a lot of these are pilot programs, and sometimes, and I'm not speaking specifically about this grant, but there are several programs where it's very clear that the state is kind of pushing their goals. They are being a little bit they can be prescriptive about what they think tribes want or need, or how they would like tribes to move forward to help the state with their climate goals. And so I think that conversation really needs to keep going, is, what's the nexus between the state goals and the tribal goals? Because it can feel sometimes a little bit like, tribes are being used to pursue state goals. And so just finding that balance between really amplifying tribal priorities and while also understanding that state funding needs to achieve state goals, and just, finding that nexus through conversation and consultation.
Yeah, thank you. Chairman, interested in your perspective, particularly because initially you sort of were thinking, what does this grant program look like? But what advice would you have to others that might be trying to set up programs like this in state or federal government?
Tribes must be invited to the table. Tribes know what they need. That's get our voice, respect our knowledge of the land. Respect tribal sovereignty is another big one. We've had many issues in the past, people trying to come after our sovereignty, full or partial, whatever it may be. But that's all we have. That defines us as a independent people, is our sovereignty. We bring us to the table, we can build these relationships and build trust with each other, and have equitable partnerships and making stuff work. We're working towards our co-management too. We got the Cal Fire Tribal Wildfire Resiliency Grant, waiting on the money for that. Anybody here from Cal Fire, please send us our grant money. But it's just creating those partnerships,
Yeah. And that's a real thing too. I would say guilty as charged. Sometimes state government can move slowly on these programs. So, we're not declaring victory in terms of, getting the funding out the door. We have to actually focus on getting the funding out the door and doing it efficiently.
Yes.
Yeah. But Treasurer Ramirez, Hilo, what's your take? I mean, what are some examples of where you think, maybe state gets it wrong that we should think about moving forward?
Yes, I just wanted to echo what the two other tribal leaders just said. But foremost, I believe that every single California agency should have a Geneva, a position like Geneva's position, because that helps a lot, just being able to have a person. Then also people like Elaine and Jordan, being able to just email them and be like, hey, the grant guidelines saying this, that isn't applicable to tribes in any way whatsoever. How can we work this out? And this, having them work with their team and then coming back and be like, oh yeah, disregard that, it doesn't apply to tribes. I'm like, great. However, moving forward, it'd be great if those things could be shared with other governmental agencies, so that way this isn't happening reoccurringly, to where there's language that's just added because it's something that's copy and pasted, and then it's sent into this grant program, that grant program, and then every single time tribes have to say, hey, that doesn't apply to us. For example, I just wanted to put one thing that was in the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Guidelines that was a little tricky, was that there's a section that had said that all positions funded by the grant have to pay prevailing wage, and then they linked to the California Labor Department, etc. However, prevailing wage, all of those prevailing wage positions are all construction, and they differentiate between apprentice and master craftsmen. And then that whole entire system seems like it's built around labor unions and lineman colleges. However, our tribe doesn't have any unions or differentiate between like an apprentice and a master for something, TEK practitioner. It also doesn't, since the prevailing wage only applies to construction jobs, like it has them differentiated by mason workers, bricklayers, concrete people. What is prevailing wage for a cultural monitor? What's prevailing wage for a TEK practitioner? What's prevailing wage for an elder that needs to teach the young kids about the plants and their medicinal properties and such? So I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
If that gets every single time, it's kind of a hassle. Can we remove that or amend it or something? So there's just that kind of blanketed language that's added that serves as a barrier to tribes, especially if they don't have the resources to hire a lawyer to look into it.
Yeah, really helpful. I think the state has built, that's a great example too. The state has built these requirements for good reasons and strong intents, but it compounds the complexity of doing something with the state and essentially checking all the boxes, and totally understand that we need to build clarity and help these programs be accessible. Geneva, just interested in your reflections. You and your team have been at this, and your co-leader and your deputy director Megan and Jordan, Elaine, Pete, Marie. They've been working really hard on this for the last year and a half. What have you learned as it relates to actually helping this program actually work for tribes?
Yes. Well, I'll say that we're very excited to set up this grant program, and it's brand new. And so when setting up anything new, there's always many moving components. But what I would say that kind of my first reflection of setting up the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program was I really enjoyed the intertribal roundtable sessions that we were hosted by many tribes across the state of California, and had the opportunity to actually look at the draft grant guidelines with tribal leaders, with grant writers, right, with the teams that were going to actually be applying for the fund, and really kind of learn like what's working, what doesn't work, how do we write this. Treasurer Ramirez, really appreciate your feedback on that. Of course, we can always improve, but I really enjoyed that process of kind of thinking about how do we shape a grant program that can help advance tribal priorities. I would say that kind of the second reflection for this grant program, and I'm so glad that you all had such positive interactions with the grant team. Jordan, Elaine, Pete, Megan, Marie, all hands on deck, right, on providing technical assistance and working closely with tribes. And my reflection would be that the open office hours on Fridays, we seem to get a lot of positive feedback on that space, and having a place just to talk to the grant team and ask those questions and navigate the different state processes that are associated with grant funds. So we've received a lot of positive feedback from that aspect, and hope to continue that. What we've been calling it like a concierge service, right? That technical assistance component as tribes are navigating the grant agreements and then the property acquisitions, and really closing on these important ancestral land returns, and then back to tribal stewardship, right? And so we really are excited to have the team continue in that technical assistance role, work closely with tribal leaders and your all staff.
That's amazing. So, not surprisingly, some good questions about when's the next round of funding. I maybe take a crack at answering this, but then also, Geneva, interested in your perspective. So I think we're really excited about, actually getting money out the door. And I want to acknowledge the governor and the legislature, who are the ones that actually have identified allocated the funding 2 years ago, and $100 million, and then $7 million or $6 million that CAL FIRE identified from its funding to add to that, and then $1 million from the Ocean Protection Council that is adding to that. So it's ultimately $107 million. For those that follow state government and the state budget, this is a tough budget year. We have a fairly volatile revenue stream with personal income tax and capital gains, and so we had some really remarkable years in general fund surplus, and this is the opposite. So I don't anticipate additional funding happening over the next year, but I will say a couple of things that this has catalyzed even in recent months are other entities not related to the state interested in funding ancestral land return and wanting to understand what proposals that are out there, which includes philanthropy, which might not always be the best source of funding, but could be a source of funding for some of these projects. So trying to encourage other sources of funding, and then also interest from other state departments that might have surplus land that really never, believe it or not, understood that ancestral land return was a pathway that they could pursue. So they're looking at this and now saying, oh, interesting, I wonder how that could work on our end. From my perspective, again, not only the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, because we want to improve environmental conservation, and what better way to do that than partner with tribes to support tribal leadership doing just that. Geneva, what else? Where else do you think are points of progress given the challenging budget?
Yeah, well, thank you for highlighting the opportunities for partnering with private entities, philanthropy, land conservancies. Many non-tribal entities are very excited about tribal partnerships. And I would highlight that that's something that's kind of called for, right? In the Pathways to 30x30 strategy, that's what's called for in the Natural Working Lands Climate Smart strategy. Many other statewide policy goals is really collaborative partnerships with tribes to reach these important environmental and ancestral land return priorities. Something else I would highlight is many of our other departments here at the agency and across the state are also very excited about ancestral land return. So the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program was, tailored and focused on tribal partnerships, but many other programs across the state are shifting their grant guidelines and identifying ways to better partner with tribes so those funds can support ancestral land return as well. And so really recommend folks who are looking at future ancestral land return priorities, reach out to those private philanthropies, reach out to those land conservancies and land trusts, but also check out other grant programs here at the state and federal government and see how, even if it's not a tribal set-aside program, there can be opportunities for ancestral land return. And we have one grant program that is open just now at the California Natural Resources Agency, the Environmental Enhancement Mitigation Grant Program. And so recommend folks take a look at that on our website. And yeah, and I really do think that it's because of tribal leadership and tribal expertise pushing the importance of increasing access, co-management, land return, with the idea of we need to have traditional ecological knowledge back on the land. We need tribal stewardship back on the land, tribal sovereignty back on the land. That's what's really driving this movement. And I'm just so appreciative of the time and energy that California Native American tribal leaders, cultural practitioners have put into this. And we are seeing some very exciting shifts now throughout the state of California, and even the state of the United States. And that's because of tribal leadership. So just from the bottom of my heart, Wado, and thank you for your all's partnership throughout this process.
It is a moment of tremendous opportunity, driven by these tribal leaders. Geneva, you spent part of last weekend with Secretary Deb Haaland at the Department of Interior, herself trying to figure out how to make these partnerships happen. You mentioned, other non-state groups. There was a remarkable example of ancestral land return far up north between a conservation nonprofit, a tribe, and the National Park Service. That was Save the Redwoods and the Yurok and the tribe and the National Park Service. So many different models of ancestral land return. And I think our goal is to try to expand this, to accelerate it, to really build this movement. So thank you so much, tribal leaders, for joining this. Huge kudos. Let's focus on getting out the money, including getting the CAL FIRE money to the chairman, but really ensuring that these 34 projects take shape and that we can celebrate your collective success as we identify, how to get more funding for this program in the future. I think it's been a really valuable hour as judged by the emojis coming across the screen. I think we almost got 400 people on this, which just demonstrates the interest and the support for this movement. So once again, thanks, and look forward to our collective progress moving forward. Take care, everyone. Oh, let me also say, if you have any follow-up questions, suggestions, hit us up on this email, whether it's on this topic or if you want to share suggestions for other discussions. We're really interested in your input. And again, there'll be a recording of this discussion along with all of the information in the chat on our agency website tomorrow. So you can go on resources.ca.gov to find that information. Once again, thanks all.